Ludwig van Beethoven, a man not forgotten by history, a composer who turned his life experiences into some of the best music ever written, the one who is the bridge between the classical and romantic periods in the classical genre of music. However, his music cannot be fully appreciated by itself. Beethoven grew up poor in the city of Bonn, Germany, but he had a passion for music and was recognized as a child prodigy. Despite his abusive, over-demanding father, young Ludwig made friends easily and participated in social events. Thanks to his musical talent, he had the ability to perform for Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart and receive instruction from Joseph Haydn, two of the most renowned composers during this period. Beethoven's early compositions reflected the style at the time. Beethoven's first piano concerto is one of many pieces that reflects the works of Mozart and the influence during the classical period. Unfortunately, Beethoven would begin to lose his hearing when he was 28 years old. A mild condition he kept secret for over a year before he couldn't take it anymore. He had to tell someone. One letter written to his friend Karl Amunda reads,
"Your Beethoven is living an unhappy life, quarreling with nature and its creator, often cursing the latter. Know that my noblest faculty, my hearing, has greatly deteriorated. When you were still with me, I felt the symptoms but kept silent. Now it continually grows worse, and whether or not a cure is possible has become the question."
Beethoven wrote many letters to friends, family, physicians, and political figures. This would become his primary form of communication since he would become isolated from society because of his deafness.
To give you some idea of my extraordinary deafness, I must tell you that in the theater, I'm obliged to lean up close against the orchestra in order to understand the actors, and when a little way off I hear none of the high notes of the instruments or singers. It's most astonishing that in conversation some people never seem to observe this. Being subject to fits of absence, they attribute it to that cause. I often can scarcely hear a person speaking if low, and I can distinguish the tones, but not the words. And yet I feel intolerable if anyone shouts at me.
However, Beethoven still composed. This was his passion that he would not abandon, but his condition did not reflect the light tone of the classical period. He needed to express his frustration, but prove that his deafness could be overcome.
I almost reached a point to putting an end to my life. It was only the art that held me back. It seemed impossible to leave the world until I had brought forth all that I had felt I called to produce. And so I endured this wretched existence. May my determination endure until it pleases the inexorable Parse.
This is when Beethoven began what is considered the heroic style, when his music would reflect the heroic journey. This style is most prominent in Beethoven's Third Symphony, also known as the Eroica. The piece would begin by introducing the hero, later on, the hero faces a conflict, and towards the end of the piece, the hero triumphs. It was during this period between 1800 and 1812 when Beethoven would become most prolific, writing 16 piano sonatas, 6 symphonies, 1 opera, and many more pieces in a variety of styles. But then for 5 years, the music stopped. By this point, Beethoven lost his hearing. He could not perform his music in concert, and had become isolated among society. Until this point, he would write music to fight distress, but there was no more music to write.
God help me! Thou seest me deserted by all men. O harsh fate, my unhappy condition will never end. There is no salvation for you except to go away. Only by that you can lift yourself up to the summits of your art again.
But he eventually found his muse and continued writing. Since he was completely deaf, it's rumored that Beethoven sawed the legs off of his piano and banged the keys as loud as he could, only to feel the vibrations on the floor. While he wrote less music, the quality remained stellar while becoming more experimental. When released in 1819, his Hammer-Clavier piano sonata was considered unplayable. But then he wrote the Ninth, a symphony longer than any other at the time, a piece that took 7 years to write, and during a time when he could not hear a single note. Was it worth it? Was it worth it to stay alive only to write music? It seems history has already answered that question.